Welcome back to the Worthy for 30 podcast. I am your host, Eric Tash. With me today, thanks to Bordy.ai, I was connected to Stacy Huston, who is the executive director at 6degrees.org. Stacy, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Eric. This was so nice. And I, too, am really grateful for Bordy for introducing us.
Isn't it amazing? You know, you're like a friend or a colleague recommends you got to talk to this AI agent, the super connector, and hey, we were connected. I love when anyone, whether it's human or AI, gets it right, especially on the first time. And with AI now, the output is based on the input. So I'm really fortunate and gracious to Bordy for putting us together. So for the folks who are listening to this conversation, especially the nonprofit leadership folks, you definitely want to lean in. Stacy has incredible experience at Aperture for working with nonprofits, especially when the pie in terms of money going to nonprofits is flat or declining, and there are more nonprofits being created year over year. So definitely lean into this episode. And Stacy is a wealth of information, and I'm going to include places where you can follow Stacy and 6 Degrees, so you can continue to learn from her, because she is a giver. She is someone who is willing to share her knowledge with the world to make the world a better place. So where I'd like to start, Stacy, is a quick icebreaker. What's something that you've done recently for the first time or that was new to you?
I purchased a minivan.
You purchased a minivan. Okay. A minivan.
I know that sounds like that's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
It is. It is for this millennial woman who grew up being like, I would never, and went through the whole kind of transition of like SUVs or that's the cool mom move. I finally just stopped fighting it. Minivans are luxury.
Yes.
They are super functional, and we jumped all the way in. And so it was unexpected, but our family is delighting in it.
Delighted and benefiting and better off with having a minivan. And excellent. And you've been with 6 Degrees for 6-7 years?
9
years. Okay. My apologies. 9 years. And how did you first get into, working in the nonprofit sector, and how that lead you to working at 6 Degrees?
Well, funny enough, 6 Degrees was the first organization in the nonprofit sector that I actually was employed by. My background was all sales and business development right out of college, and worked in a lot of different industries and kind of climbed the corporate ladder. And it wasn't until I moved to Fairfax from Southern California in like 2013 that through my sales job, they said, oh, you should start attending the Chamber of Commerce. And so I did, and very quickly got asked to be on the board. And that was really my first nonprofit experience, like sitting on a board. And I tell this story because I think it was actually really important for this milestone in my life. Up until that point, I thought that I really was going to be locked into sales because I was good at it and it's all I had ever done. And kind of what kind of other skill set do you have when you're just a really strong salesperson? But sitting on this board taught me that I was actually had a pretty high acumen for just strategy, planning, kind of delegating, organizing, getting people moving in the right direction. And that was kind of my first foray into the space. And I joined another board, which is another kind of business community board. Eventually met a nonprofit that I was really passionate about, joined their board, launched a TEDx organization that was all nonprofit in design. And then eventually a good friend said, I think you would be really great for this role at 6 Degrees. And I thought, nah, a California girl doesn't move to Virginia and then end up working for Kevin Bacon. But here we are.
And how is your that sales experience? I'm a big proponent of connecting the dots, because like you work in sales. Like, how does sales connect to the nonprofit sector? Tell us how you were able to connect those dots from your sales experience to the nonprofit world.
Well, I think it's also kind of an interesting story because I didn't have traditional nonprofit experience. I just looked at it all as sales, right? So in my mind, instead of asking for someone to buy something, I was asking someone to invest in making the world a better place. And so I think that sales is a tool that we all use. I think sometimes sales becomes a bad word to a lot of people. They don't want to be a salesperson but we're constantly selling, whether it's ourselves, our vision, our products, the company we work for, our mission. And so it was really a leveraging factor for me. I really started looking at, why do nonprofits feel like they're almost begging for support? I felt like there was a strategy that could be implemented that really made nonprofits feel like they were partners in the space, as opposed to kind of the redheaded stepchild, as they say, right? That is
Mm-hmm.
constantly needing, but not creating the value of that ask. There's just so much value in strong, healthy nonprofits as the cornerstones in any community. So I leaned into my experience of persuasion
Mm-hmm.
and helping people to see what's in it for them and mutual benefit. And that has really, I think, led to my success in this field.
Excellent. And you've been with the organization for 9 years. What were you tasked with on day one when you first came to Six Degrees? Like what I know it's a tall task, and to think back to then, but just love to
Jeez.
understand, to give the detail, again, to those nonprofit leaders of, it sounds like a daunting task. You're going from sales to the nonprofit world and sector, and Six Degrees, again, serves local communities and their specific causes that it support, again, the nonprofits on the ground. Yeah, but love to understand. Yeah, what was that task on day one? So day one, again, you've been with the organization for 9 years. Day one, you had a tall task, I imagine. What was that task? What were those priorities when you first came on board? Again, this question's more geared towards the nonprofit leaders that are listening, are going to be listening to this episode, and again, learning from one of the best in the field. So
I
what
appreciate you. Yeah. No, it's a great question. It is a long time ago. So
yeah.
having to think back. The thing about where we were at Six Degrees was that sixdegrees.org was really like an experiment. Kevin was leaning into something that he'd become known for, the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon theory, kind of turned the idea on its head, right?
Right.
And was
Yeah.
like, well, if you take me out of it, we're all just 6 degrees or less from someone or something that really needs our help. So how can we leverage connection to do good? And we did a lot of different things up until that point. And a lot of them were around tying celebrities or influencers, you can call them now, to causes that they cared about, to see if their fans and
Mm-hmm.
followers would get involved. And a lot of what we were doing at the time that I came in were around kind of spreading joy. A lot of our messaging was around kindness. So we would do a lot of pop-ins and drop-ins and pop-ups, I should say, where Kevin would be touring somewhere, filming somewhere, and we would find small grassroots nonprofits, because that's always been what we focused on here in the United States. And we would create these special kind of secret events where
Mm-hmm.
he might pop into a food warehouse and play a couple songs with his band, or
Mm-hmm.
he would go and tour a volunteer facility at a shelter along with the staff, and just use kind of his platform to turn heads and say, look at this organization in my backyard. I wonder how I can get involved. And so my task was, they had done a lot of different things. And Kevin said, I still don't think we figured out what our thing is. And so it was really coming in and having some strategic visioning around, what is our impact story? And I really became hyper focused and really fixated on this idea of connection. And as we know, over the next decade, we've seen how isolation, loneliness has
Mm-hmm.
become an epidemic, according to our own US Surgeon General in 2023. And we've
Mm-hmm.
seen the results of what that is: disconnection, anger, apathy, a lot of things that are just fracturing us as a society. And so everything we do at 6 degrees is, how can we get people to kind of, it's, instead of turning away from each other, turn towards each other,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's through a service activity, whether it's by flooding their feeds with positive content and stories of people that are making a difference, so that they can be inspired to either do something similar or to help that person on their mission of doing good. Because we do really believe that at the core of each person is this desire to be connected and be in community, and that we often share the same value systems, but
Mm-hmm.
we often don't see it either, right? Because it's not the most clickable, it's not the most interesting in the algorithm. So how can we tell stories that really do drive attention, and that attention creates wider nets for impact for these organizations that we're supporting?
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. It sounds like Six Degrees, and correct me if I'm wrong, Six Degrees is a nonprofit for nonprofits. You're helping,
Correct.
again, and it's hyper local, right? You mentioned Kevin Bacon, Six Degrees, the Six Degrees of Kevin Bacon game. And again, supporting these local nonprofits. So can you give me an example? Because I imagine there's a short list of causes that are near and dear to create that connection. What are those causes? And we'd love to hear some of those anecdotes of the impact that Six Degrees has had on those nonprofits serving those communities.
Absolutely. So we have four main pillars, what we call youth empowerment, equity and justice, building sustainable living environments, and emerging crisis. And their meaning are broad, right? It allows us to tap into a lot of different cause-based work that we feel like we can make the most impact around. For a long time, we were agnostic of pillars, but it's hard to honestly get funding as a nonprofit when you're not really clear and concise on the types of organizations that you do and don't support and moving forward. Some of the things that we do, we create a lot of corporate social responsibility engagement. So you have a workforce, you want to do some giving back. So often it's like through HR, they pack some lunch bags, they drop it off. They're not really connected to the organization. They do something for huge entities like United Way or all great organizations, Red Cross, right? But it doesn't feel hyper connected and personal to your staff, to even maybe sometimes the region that you all are living in. So Six Degrees will do things like come alongside the organization and say, we're going to find 3 or 4 hyper local organizations in your community that can be connected to your mission. We're going to usually create some type of kit packing activation where we invite the nonprofits in. They get to talk about, hey, this is what you're packing. It's not just a comb, it's actually dignity. It's not just a toothbrush, it's confidence. It allows us to send our constituents into an interview and give them a fair shake at getting an opportunity that could change their life. Really helping to bridge the gap of just something that comes over in a deck and goes through HR and the employees are told to do something. And that really changes the care and the feeling of connection that the employees feel, where they're also doing something side by side. Because so often in today's day and age, we're doing what we're doing now, Eric, right? We're on a Zoom screen, which allows us to feel like we're connected, but we're not, right?
Yeah.
There's a different energy when you're next to somebody and you say, oh man, I didn't even know you were in a cast. What happened?
Yeah.
Oh, how are you doing? What, you guys have any summer plans? Right? It makes way for small talk. Small talk can become big talk, right? Where you're really starting to connect with people again. It increases morale, employee satisfaction, engagement, innovation. You become more connected with people. And so we see a drive all in all in employee wellness. And then a lot of times these organizations meet people through their employees and staff that become longtime volunteers of them. But there's a two-prong approach. While we're there and we're creating this event and creating this space, we're also capturing a lot of content. Because our goal is to capture the magic and tell this wider story about why these types of engagements are important. And also we want to talk about these nonprofits that are hyper local that can be supported, and this is how. And so we always are looking for ways to leverage our time with a team to do as much good as possible. Because often these nonprofits, they might have a lot of volunteer capacity and support. They might have some corporate partnerships. But often the last thing, which we would argue is one of the most important things, is marketing support. Because there's almost a badge of honor that nonprofits wear. Well, we're going to pour everything back into the programs. We're going to spend all of our money just helping people. We don't have time to do paid ads or create special content because we're in the work. I'm like, do you think if Coca-Cola said that we're not going to be spending, we're just going to make a pristine product and keep going, that they would be around? No, we'd only hear Pepsi's name, right? So we're trying to come in and bridge the gap for these nonprofits on storytelling is really critical. There's like an ethical way to tell those stories. You don't have to, keep the people that you're helping front and center. You can tell the stories in other really unique and innovative ways that connect people to your work and get them to be generous with their time, talent, resources.
Oh, that's excellent. So there's a lot to unpack. Can you give an example of a company? Are you able to talk about a company that came to Six Degrees and said, you know what, Stacy, a lot of our employees are talking about XYZ cause that's super important. Do you have a partner nonprofit that we can work with to create that sort of programming, to make that impact? Because again, it's not just checking the box and going through HR. I love this. It's getting the whole company involved. So I'd love to hear from soup to nuts.
Absolutely. Great example is Bell Bank in one of my favorite places in the country, Fargo, North Dakota. Truly is one of my favorite places. Bell Bank is a kind of a privately held bank that's regionally there and a few other regions around the country. but they live and breathe kind of this pay it forward mentality. Their chief people officer is very committed to helping the employees feel connected and to serving kind of nonprofits in the greater area. So we had launched a Building Kits by Kevin Bacon program around Footloose turning the Footloose, the film, turning 40 years old. And so we said, for this campaign, we're going to build 40,000 essential resource kits with partners all over the country. And one of the employees at Bell Bank heard about it, asked to be connected, and said, we would love to host you all here. Could you help us plan a kit pack? So we, of course, oblige. We organize everything soup to nuts. We found 4 organizations in the local community that were doing just amazing work, from, domestic violence shelters to educational support to basic hygiene needs to helping some very underserved youth in the community. We came in, we made very specific kind of bags for each, welcomed them in, told the story. We didn't just have like a huge celebration and party. It was very fun, music, all that stuff. We had cutouts of Kevin Bacon everywhere. But it also, we decided to hold it alongside National Pay It Forward Day. And so, funny enough, the guys that run the kind of national day calendar are in that area of the country. So they came out and, filmed it real time alongside us and told that story to their network. We invited kind of local news and media to tell the story, and then have actually gone back even past this. We built 1,000 kits with their team that day, but we were able to go back and interview each of these nonprofits one-on-one and bring them into a panel conversations with even more, strategic nonprofit leaders in the community to talk about collectively what they're doing. Because we actually believe that a rising tide lifts all boats. It's, old saying, but it still rings very true. The problem is nonprofits are so often pitted against each other, right?
Yeah.
I can't talk about this organization. That's my donor. I need to make sure that my donor's only looking at me. And we don't think about the fact that donors typically want us to work ourselves out of a job. We should want to work ourselves out of a job. So they get really excited when they see that you are being strategic, working across the aisle, if you will, with other organizations that may not be doing the same exact work, but they may be touching the same population. And now you're holistically helping families and young people and those that need it the most in all of these different touch points, so that we really can change the narrative. We can actually move the needle on some of this cause-based work.
No, that's excellent. So in terms of, going out to Fargo, North Dakota and finding those, those 4 local nonprofits, hitting on again on those touch points, as you mentioned, what is the process of finding the right nonprofit?
That's a great question. Although we're not a foundation, we really do look at these kind of engagements because we do them for free as grant opportunities. So we use a system called Submittable. Shout out to Submittable. They're not a sponsor, but we do love them. And it allows us to ask really kind of like criteria questions. And for us, every organization has to fall into one of those 4 pillars. They have to be $3 million in budget or under. Much of them are far, far less. They could be $250,000, $500,000 a year organizations. And they have to be operating for at least 3 years. Because our goal is that when we do hopefully cause an influx of attention to come their way, they have infrastructure in place. They have a team in place to kind of balance that and also really take hold of that moment so that they can turn that into additional supporters. So we usually ask questions about their needs. I think very often in the nonprofit space, donors are well-intentioned, well-meaning, corporate donors, individual foundations, but they can just assume, because I would want this is what you need, right? And we don't do that. We say, we know marketing, we know communications really well. We know how to get people to, to take a harder look at you, but you're the expert. So we're going to ask you, what are your needs? Maybe we assume it's hygiene. Maybe we assume it's a short form or long form content, but we spend some time with you and we actually realize, oh man, you need an entire branding, rebranding plan and strategy, because you have the stories, you have the impact. But when people go to your website, they're like, this is unintelligible, right? Like this looks like it's not very professionally done. And unfortunately, there has been a lot of trust lost in the nonprofit space. And because of that, we have to make sure that we're operating at even a higher level of transparency, clarity, And unfortunately, we have to spend a little bit more money and resources if we can, or find partnerships that can help us put our best, face forward, because you may only get one chance to capture attention and to look like you're buttoned up and ready to go. And so we really kind of come alongside them and say, what is the best first entry point to supporting your work, so that anything that comes after that is actually beneficial and it moves the dial, and we don't lose out on opportunity for you because you weren't prepared for it.
Gotcha. So going back to the Bell Bank example and working with those 4 nonprofits, again, you have this, this activation, this moment in time. But how are you measuring that subsequent impact that,
Yeah.
again, putting the nonprofit to Bell Bank together on that nonprofit?
Absolutely. So a couple different ways. When we're building these kits specifically, we do include a handwritten card that lets the person know that's receiving the kit that it was actually put together by someone that's actually wishing them well, thinking about them, loving them. And on the back of that, there's a barcode. So it allows us to get real-time feedback from the end user of that kit, so that we can actually hear directly from that person. We think that's important. Sometimes even nonprofits get it wrong. They may think that there's a need, and we might get feedback that says, man, I would have really appreciated X, right?
Interesting.
There's a lot of learnings along the way. Early on in this campaign, we had ordered kind of like a pre-made kit in terms of hygiene products. And someone said to us, this actual shampoo and conditioner set reminds me of what we used to get when we were in prison. And it was like this re-triggering piece that we didn't realize.
Yeah.
And so we vowed, okay, well, we're never going to, even if it's offered to us and someone says, hey, we'll pay for this, we'll sponsor this part of the kit, that we would only purchase products and acquire products with partners that we felt like we would want to use ourselves, right? So little things like that in terms of measuring the impact that are more qualitative, but it's also ensuring that we're able to serve everybody that a nonprofit has. So a lot of our impact is around, if you have 350 constituents, we want to make sure that we're giving you at least that many bags, so that for a year, you don't have to worry about these welcome kits and you have what you need to serve your population. One of the things about these kind of essential resource bags that are often overlooked unless you're in the nonprofit spaces, when you are serving someone, it might be at a food pantry or a shelter, dress for success. Maybe you're doing educational support or tutoring. But when you're starting to work with a family, oftentimes they show up and they don't have the basic essentials. And you will often see nonprofits that they're not in this line of business at all, but they'll have like a welcome kit of these types of items in like a closet. So they're spending funding almost like, just to make sure that when someone comes to them, they're like, oh, they need deodorant, they need chapstick, they need this. And so what we know to be true is that by doing these kits, sometimes it's $25,000 worth of items. That is like a hard line cost that now they don't have to worry about. And that can really go back into their programming. So now they're tutoring more children. They're sleeping more people throughout the year for their shelters and beds. And so that's really how we think about that impact. In terms of the campaigns that we're building, a lot of our campaigns are around, like I said, convening, bringing nonprofits together. And so a lot of that has to do with like our impressions, how many people tune in, how many people engage. We ask people questions afterwards in surveys. For instance, we did a mental health campaign in May. We brought together 14 different nonprofits that touch mental health, from student athletes to touring musicians to veteran suicide, and really everything in between. And then we created a resource guide, of toolkit, if you will, of lots of things that can help us prepare to have stronger mental health and putting our well-being first. But also, if you know someone that's really struggling, a toolkit to give to somebody to offer them some support. And so everyone that downloaded that, we kind of received their information and we sent out a survey. And we had responses that shared that, like, thank you, because of this campaign, I actually realized that I needed to seek help, and I did. And so this is the type of additional kind of metrics that we'll look to. So if we're building a campaign, what supplemental guide or toolkit or resource can we provide collectively that can help the constituents as a whole, wherever they are? So 6 Degrees is really it's not just about the storytelling, but what's something that we can leave in the hands of people so that they are better prepared to have a conversation or support someone in this way moving forward.
Gotcha. And it sounds like, because again, you're collecting the surveys directly from the recipient, you're creating like a data moat where, if there's another, someone wants to create 5 degrees of
Yeah.
just throwing that out there, they can't really compete against you because again, you have all this first party data.
Yes.
So that's a big differentiator. What else do you think, again, Kevin Bacon aside, what else do you think are the differentiators between 6 Degrees versus other nonprofits that are helping other nonprofits?
See, one, I don't think there's a lot of nonprofits. Like there's a lot of foundations that are kind of doing similar things, grants, right?
Sure.
But they often can be like no organizations, like you ask for a gift and you just can't be served. Or they're actually for-profits that are helping nonprofits. So a lot of what they're doing is generated by vendors that are getting to pitch themselves in front of nonprofits. Sure. So it can almost feel like you're being sold to constantly. So with 6 Degrees, that's not the dynamic. The dynamic is that we're just like you, we're a 501c3. We're looking for collective giving and gifts, also corporate and institutional giving to help support our mission of connecting more people so that we can really build stronger, healthier communities. And so we do think that we can't talk about this work without obviously talking about Kevin. Like Kevin is a star and it does help us to open doors. Now, Kevin doesn't engage in every single campaign that we do. He's very autonomous in that way. It's like the work. However, when we call and ask for a meeting, more often than not, someone will actually say, yes, we can get routed to the right person. We leverage our networks very strategically in that way. And I think that that is a powerful thing because we know that, this small organization in Fargo may not have the network to get in front of a Bombas or a Dr. Brenner's or, a Tom Shoes, but we know that we have the ability to do that. And so oftentimes we're leveraging our platform so that we can source goods and products that are actually free and redistribute them to organizations in need. Because there are some nonprofits that do some of the same things. They collectively get a lot of organizations to donate to them, but then they charge the nonprofits like a fulfillment fee, if you will. So they're still having to pay for goods that this other organization received for free. And so we're trying to eliminate that. Our goal isn't to charge you for something we receive for free. It's to create access to something that you wouldn't have had otherwise. And to ensure that you're then able to continue to doing your work and pour that back into your programming.
Gotcha. So it's focus on what you're really good at. We will help you, where there might be some gaps.
Yes.
Based on our network.
Absolutely.
That is amazing. So, in terms of, you're helping nonprofits, you're connecting nonprofits to bell banks and some larger, businesses that, want to do good in their local community. How does 6 Degrees keep its lights on? You mentioned, some corporate, sponsors, but what are the other funders behind 6 Degrees that again helps it sustain? Because as part of the show and again it's spread doing good. How can that person that benefactor reach out to 6 Degrees and want to support?
Absolutely. So it's important to share that definitely we have donors like Kevin and the Bacon family and other corporate partners that we work with, but the vast majority of our 900 donors are individual givers. We have built a really strong, I think, community where we have shared that like a $6 gift is a gift that is deeply meaningful and we're grateful for, because we talk about the collective a lot here. And a gift to 6 Degrees is a gift to many. So when someone says, I don't really have that much, it's $6, they get to be a part of something, right? Get to be a part of a community trying to raise the attention of these wonderful organizations in their backyard. And so we really do focus on the individual donors as well, especially in places where so much of what we are doing now is online, in places like Instagram or LinkedIn and those sorts of things. And so we kind of have that collective pool where people can give a gift, and those gifts can often turn into a kit that is being distributed to someone that's, experiencing need. And then we have larger gifts where individuals even come in and say, we want to support this program. We want to support you raising attention for this organization that I love. And so that's another way that we're able to help nonprofits, is to say, you want a podcast series? Like, You want some short form content. Let's think about a funder that can come in and help support that programming so that we can reach a wider audience to tell your story. And so that's a really wonderful way for them to kind of offset those marketing costs for a nonprofit that they care about and get their mission out to a wider audience.
Excellent. And then because again, your expertise is, again, connecting the dots. So Stacy or 6 Degrees has a creative lead or someone from an agency to come in, but of course they don't work for free, but you can connect that funder to that creative resource to help tell that nonprofit story really, really well and for it to break through.
Absolutely. Probably one of the best examples of this is a current campaign that we're in called Purpose Produced. So 6 Degrees went alongside our partners at Advertising Week. We said, hey, listen, we know nonprofits. We can identify some really powerful stories. Would you all help connect us with 6 top tier advertising agencies that can build campaigns for these nonprofits that could never afford that on their own? They said yes. They helped find 6 advertising agencies that have worked on everything from, Target to what's the water, the death.
Oh, liquid.
I always like blank on the death, liquid death. I'm like everything from the death water, from liquid death, and just,
yes.
I mean, just incredible advertising agencies that really know how to grow fandom around products. And how to get to people to lean in. And then we did an application process. We had 300 nonprofits apply. And within 6 weeks, we identified 6 organizations to pair them with. We launched that in June, and they're building complete 360 media campaigns. We're talking about, hero video, audio only, out of home services, billboards, park benches, magazines, the full spectrum to really bring their stories to life. And what we're hearing is that this is transformational. Like, this is going to open up doors that we never thought would be open for us. And it's really exciting. They're going to start launching in October of 2025 through the end of the year. And we'll continue because we've made these evergreen to be able to utilize these storytelling for years to come with these nonprofits. So a lot of what we're doing is getting our corporate partners to say, what's your talent? We're not asking you to do something that's completely out of scope. Like, what does your workforce really get excited about? Now we're going to insert purpose, something local that they could be connected to, and we're going to make magic together. Like, this is a strategic partnership. And so that is something that 6 Degrees is fully leaning into, kind of early stages. We're going through a beta test this fall and into the winter. But we're planning on taking something like Purpose Produce and seeing how we can scale it so that instead of 6 nonprofits, we're going to be able to help hundreds.
So 6 nonprofits and, in partnership with Advertising Week. For the folks who are listening, where can they learn more about these 6 nonprofits and the campaign?
Yeah, please go to 6degrees.org/purpose produced. They can follow along. We have a really fun unveiling video where we brought Kevin onto a Zoom call and surprised all the winners when we told them that they won. There's a lot of tears, a lot of crying. And then on that page is where we will drop every hero video as it's created and ready to go out. And then these nonprofits, we're not the gatekeeper for that, right? Like, so you'll be able to learn all about each of those, follow their journeys as they talk about how this has been transformationally impacting their work. And we hope to hear back from people. Like, what did they like about the campaigns? What other organizations do they think that we need to know about? We really want this to be kind of communal.
Yeah. And I imagine, you mentioned, the us meaning, yes, the nonprofits are going to benefit from the exposure, but also 6 Degrees. Like, what are you and your team expecting, in terms of the response, as more people learn more about 6 Degrees and the work that it's doing in these local communities?
Well, I think talking about transformational impact for us, it's the same. I think it has been hard for people to understand, even to be able to articulate how we are a nonprofit for other nonprofits. Like, what are you doing that really kind of supports them at scale? And I think people are going to be seeing it at such a grand stage that they'll actually really understand that the connectivity, being able to bring those partners together in this type of way is something that is very unique to 6 Degrees in our area of focus. And so we're thrilled that we're going to have that opportunity. as well as it's already opening doors. We've had a lot of outreach from companies that said, we saw what you're doing with this agency. This is kind of our skill set. How can we get involved? We've talked to other conferences like Advertising Week that have said, hey, is there something that you can do similar at our conference? We want to do something and give back in this way. And what we're most excited about is like foundation partners that have said that they have kind of a similar base of nonprofits that they want to support. And they see that we can be a great engine for them in terms of marketing and storytelling, while they keep funding the work of these organizations that they want to be able to make increased impact. So we're seeing an increase in our partnership ability, and we're excited for what 2026 is going to bring.
Excellent. So I know we're coming up on the hour. So in terms of 2025 and 2026, what does 2025 success look like? And what does 2026, what is the horizon? What are the goals and objectives for the new year?
Yeah. 2025 looks like all of our campaigns for Purpose Produced are out. People are buzzing about them. They're excited. We've brought in about 20 to 30 nonprofits into our beta test of a brand new platform that will allow them to have access to this type of expertise and creative strategy at scale, right? And we'll be able to get feedback from them. What's working? What do they want to see more of? What do they need additional support for? 2026 looks like us taking that beta and working with our partners on really fine tuning it, and then being able to release a pilot that will be able to help another few hundred in 2026. And so, that is our goal. It is a lofty one. Do we think we're going to hit it? Absolutely. It's the 250th year of this country. I think nonprofits are the center cornerstone for vibrant, healthy communities and societies. And we are focused on making sure that they have a moment in this celebration that people really lean into how important their work is, and why an investment in these nonprofits is an investment in their own happy, healthy, safe communities that they're a part of.
No, that's excellent. And then I want to end with, you've been at the organization for 9 years. I asked you about day one and your tasks. There's going to be, like you, I love your confidence and passion. I'm confident there's going to be someone listening who's about to start a nonprofit, or again, in the early throes of their nonprofit. What advice would you give them based on your experience?
All right, this is going to be a hard one. I would tell them, are they sure? And that's not to say don't do it.
Yeah.
But so often people go, I care about this. This happened to me. This impacted me. My first thing is, okay, have you ever worked in the nonprofit space? Have you ever volunteered long-term in a nonprofit space? If you haven't done that, I would start there, right? So that you could really understand what it takes to make a nonprofit expand and grow. The other piece is there another entity already that is doing this work? Because so often we think, I can do this better. Okay, well, maybe you should join them on their board, right? Maybe you could invest in some infrastructure that's already there and say, listen, I want to invest more. I want to fundraise. I want to help. Nonprofits would love somebody that would have that much of a vested interest that they want to fundraise and support the growth because they care about this cause as much as the people that founded, an organization that's already been in operation. What I think we're going to see in the next few years is mergers of nonprofits if they want to survive. Unfortunately, a lot of shuttering down of doors, if not just many programs. And so if we want to make sure that people don't fall through the cracks, instead of saying, let's start another, right? It's how do we combine our resources so that we can do more with what we have? So I would say start there. Give that some long and hard thoughts, really ask some questions of local organizations that you respect. And then if you still want to do it, then God bless. And I'm rooting for you. I would say come over to sixdegrees.org and we'll have lots of wonderful resources to make sure that as you start, you think about how you show up in the public space through branding and your storytelling and your messaging, because that is critical these days. You can do the best work in the whole world, but if no one wants to actually click in and read about it and look at it because the branding is off, it's so unfortunate, but other people really miss out on it. So that's my advice. I love helping and support people that have this passion. I think that takes a really special person to want to dedicate their life to the nonprofit space. And we
Right.
definitely need more of them.
Right. Okay. It's funny that you mentioned again the consistency of the through line is the marketing, the storytelling. You're the second person I've spoken to on the show. Last time it was Dave Kalina. You can have a great product, but people don't know about it. If the branding is off, the positioning is off, it's not unique, it's not differentiated. There's no story to tell. It's going to fall flat. It's going to fall flat. So, great advice. And actually, my last question is, I heard this very, very recently, Stacy, is you can't scale the person, you can scale an idea. But as I'm talking to you, it sounds like you're scaling yourself as well as the idea. I think you've defied, that concept. Tell me if I'm wrong, because again, you've gone, across the country, you've gone to all these places, you met all these people, both donors, foundations, nonprofits, connected them, to the hyper local, communities. Am I wrong, that you can't scale a person, you can only scale ideas?
That's such a good question. My husband would say that clearly you can scale a person because I'm everywhere in all places all at once.
That was the reason for the question.
Honestly, I do think very realistically, and this is kind of a topic for another day, with the help of AI, with the help of like being really intentional and strategic about your team and the individual talent that you have, you can absolutely scale an individual. I think that technology is making it easier and easier to be able to do more with really, I wouldn't say less time, but using less time to have a greater impact. And so if you are strategic, but we all tap out at some point. And so it is important to do the other unexpected thing I did, which was schedule 2 weeks of vacation for myself, because I know you need to be able to pour out of a full cup. And you need to make sure as a leader, you take that time to do that. I have not always been great about that, but I am telling you, turning off, going offline, not checking emails, not checking Slack, those sorts of things are really, really critical.
Gotcha. So in terms of that 2-week vacation, are you going like full Bear Grylls and off the grid, or?
Full Bear Grylls. We had Bear Grylls on our podcast. We had a podcast. I swear, I just have to tell this story. 6 Degrees with Kevin Bacon. He was one of our guests, and it was so funny. He was in where he lives in the UK, like on an island, and like wind was blowing, and there was like a surf around him, and he was like running around, and we were like, this is hilarious. He is like such an interesting guy. But yes, I am, and I will commit to this because as a mom now of 2 little kids, I do think it's really important to say I'm going to center our time, and they are looking. So I'm trying to lead by example. So it makes it a little easier. Yeah. Full Bear Grylls. I will probably be slow to even text someone back. Like that is my hope.
This is amazing. Stacey, this is an incredible conversation. As you mentioned, this is, some of the things we talked about, especially with AI, deserves, its own conversation. For the folks who want to follow you and follow 6 Degrees, where can they go?
I would say you can please go to 6degrees.org. You can find more on our website. We're on every major platform, LinkedIn. If you're in the corporate space, you can learn a lot about how to get involved from a workplace and CSR perspective. Follow us on Instagram at 6 Degrees of KB, as in Kevin Bacon. And you can find me at the Stacy Huston, spelled like Huston, because I married a man who had a fun phonetic way of spelling his name. And so here we are, but I'd love to be connected. I love to meet people, extend my network. And if I can be helpful in any way, that is kind of why I'm here.
Yeah, that is amazing, Stacey. Again, thank you so much. And she is true to her word. When we had our first initial conversation, just a plethora of resources that you shared with me, after our short conversation. So I really do appreciate your time and contribution to the Worthy for 30 platform. And as I like to say, I think I mentioned when we first spoke, I think of the community, the Worthy for 30 community, as, Olive Garden without the breadsticks. When you're here, your family. Again, Stacey, if there's people within the community, guests, ancillary, supporters, definitely want to connect you and 6 Degrees to help move your mission forward.
I appreciate you, Eric. Thanks for all you're doing for everybody through your platform. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.